Good morning. Welcome to our first ever Mothers at Home Matter hybrid conference. Woo! We've had nearly 170 people buy a ticket for today, both online via Zoom and here in person in London, which is fantastic. My name is Becca and I'm a volunteer for Mothers at Home Matter, or MAHM for short. I lead the support areas of MAHM, which includes organising this conference and helping mums set up local support groups. A warm welcome to anyone who is attending their first ever MAHM conference. We're so pleased that you could join us. We also want to say a big welcome to our loyal and committed members who have been coming to conference year after year. Without your support, Mothers at Home Matter simply wouldn't be able to continue, so thank you. We hope you come away from today feeling motivated and encouraged in your vital role as mothers. Thank you to our amazing sponsors this year who have helped to make the event a success. Thank you especially to our main event sponsor, Vita Health Group, whose generous sponsorship has covered the refreshments and lunch today. I want to do a special shout out to a lady called Karen Rogers, who's joining us online today with a group of local mums. She organised an event in her local parish rooms in Cambridge and invited mums to come and watch the conference together. We think this is a wonderful idea and hope many more people will do this for future conferences. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. I came to the last in-person conference in 2019 with my 6-month-old son, and it was there that I signed up to get more involved. So be warned, you may end up volunteering before the day is done. In all seriousness though, we rely on our volunteer committee to keep MAHM going. We are a small but passionate group of mums, many of us with small children, trying to squeeze MAHM work into the small pockets of spare time we have. It is hugely fulfilling, and we know that we're making a difference to so many mums who need that encouragement and assurance that they're doing the right thing for their family. But we can't do it on our own. There is so much more that we want to do, especially in the area of campaigning, to ensure more mums have the choice to care for their children themselves. But we need more people to help us. So please do keep an open mind during the conference, and as well as receiving the support and wisdom for our fantastic lineup of speakers, please do let us know if you want to get more involved. We'll be sharing specific ways you can do that as the day goes on. I think that's all from me now. I hope you really enjoy the day, and I'm now going to hand over to our chair, Anne.
Thank you, Becca, and a really warm welcome to you all. And it's so lovely, as Becca said, to see old faces and new, and a really warm welcome. And I'd just like to say thank you to the Philosophy School for allowing us to be here today. It's just wonderful to be in such a wonderful location. And welcome to all our online members, especially if you're new. It's lovely to have you. We've come together today because we all share a love of motherhood, or at least an intuitive and deep sense that it is important. Motherhood, in many ways, is not about ourselves. Giving birth as a new mum is a life-changing experience. And we suddenly have this newborn, a new human being, who is totally vulnerable and totally dependent on us. And our focus moves away from ourselves to the needs of this new child. The bond is a strong one. Where does this leave our old self? And how do we discover our new self in our new role of mother, while still playing wife, friend, and many other titles too? As a society, we seem to have lost the honour due to mother. We're very excited when our friends get pregnant and then become a mother. But after that, all support seems to ebb away. We no longer have close communities, and often family are far away. And the state help seems to be cut away also. Mothers are very much left on their own. Within a few months, the question seems to turn to, when are you going back to work? It's going against the mainstream to make the choice to stay at home to care. And for many, this choice is not possible. It's very difficult to live on one income. Yet many of us still feel deeply that it isn't right to separate mums from their babies at 9 months. Mothering is important. Today is dedicated to understanding why it is important. In order to value our own identities of mothers, we need to understand why it's valuable. So it's really great to be in your company today, looking at this question, and we've got some wonderful speakers who are going to talk us through, firstly, the early years and why it's so important to mother, and then with Liz, through the teenage years, which are challenging but wonderful too. Mothers at Home Matter was set up 30 years ago in the face of a drive to get mothers back into work. And our aims still remain the same. We have 3 core aims: to raise awareness of the development needs of very young children, to enhance the self-esteem and confidence of mothers wishing to be at home, and to campaign for a level economic playing field. So to make tax fairer and within childcare, to campaign for choice, that parents have a real choice, whether they care at home, whether they give money to their grandparent or a childminder, or use it for external care. We believe that families should have that choice. What we're not, we don't believe that all mothers should be at home. We do believe, though, that we need to challenge the policies which ignore the needs of children and portray mothers' desire as solely to be in the workplace. Quite often, when I go campaigning or when I'm in Parliament, you hear the phrase freedom from care. All mothers want to work. They're bored at home. We campaign for freedom to care. We want to see freedom and flourishing of families. We want to see excellence in care. So I'd like to move on to introducing our first speaker, Kate Silverton. We're really sad that she can't be with us today. She's had to support her mother in hospital today, and we send her all our love and best wishes. And we thank her for still committing to us today. Yesterday we did a Zoom meeting with Kate, myself and Kate. She's very much committed to this cause. She believes strongly in the importance of mothering. She's also very generously offered to do an online Instagram live afterwards for all our questions. When we thought who would we really like to speak, we thought of Kate. I actually thought she wouldn't say yes, so I was really surprised when she emailed straight back and said, I'd love to do it. It was so exciting. She's so warm, she's so non-judgmental. She really understands the brain behind the infant brain and the needs and what is needed in those early years. She's written a brilliant book called There's No Such Thing as Naughty, which really explains the science behind the infant brain, and I really recommend reading it. It shows just how important mothering is. So, let's hear her on the themes of identity, loss of it in motherhood, how to handle the juggle and the struggle, and why it's so crucial in the first few years that we are able to mother. So, over to you, Kate.
Good morning, and thank you, Anne, for that lovely introduction. I'll start in adding my apology for not being able to be with you in person today. Mothers matter, as we know, and I am, as we speak, caring for my own mum in hospital today. I was just sharing with Anne, actually, I've just come across to pre-record this for you. And the last thing she just said to me was like, they're not going to see you, are they? She said, do you want to do your hair? This is mothering. This is mothering. And it's the juggle, and I'm solo parenting with the husband away. We're selling our house, and I'm caring for my gorgeous mom. This is it. This is what we get. So I thought actually it was really important to say this is how we roll. And it's important, actually, today's theme, looking at identity, of course, our identity as mothers, the value placed on the work we do, how we value ourselves in that work. But what is it today to be a mum? And more than that, a mother who is at home. When I spoke to Anne in preparation for my keynote, we were sharing stories, and she was sharing a story about a mum she'd spoken to recently who was so exasperated, and said with a real element of resignation when she was out to dinner and was asked that inevitable, and what is it you do? And she found herself unable to reply. At least she said to reply authentically. And she found herself talking about the job that she'd once had in personnel. What value is motherhood when we mothers feel we must hide our light under another job's bushel? So I wanted to look at value today, the value of motherhood, and looking at our identity. how we see ourselves when we become parents. We're going to look at what it is we choose to, if we do choose to, and today, if we have the financial luxury of caring for our children at home. I've got 20 minutes. We want to answer as many of your questions after that as we can. And thank you very much for sending those in. But in that 20 minutes, I thought I'd share a little of my own parenting journey, the things that I've learned, why I felt compelled to write my book, There's No Such Thing as Naughty, and why I've retrained now as a child therapist. Many of you will know me as a journalist and broadcaster. I am also one of 4 children. My mum sadly lost her first, who would have been my brother, to preeclampsia. And do you know, she's yet to fully grieve the trauma of having been forced to give birth to his still body alone in a room. My dad was sent away, and to have his body taken from her, never to see him again. And I raise that just because we've been talking about it just this weekend as she's been staying with me. And again, what value do we place on motherhood? That a new mother is treated in that way. And I know times have changed, but I'm sure many of you will have many stories where we don't get the birth experience that we want, or maybe the support that we need in times of crisis. My mum was a stay-at-home mum, as that generation referred to themselves and often still do. She raised us while my dad, a taxi driver and long-distance lorry driver, worked long hours, sometimes for long periods abroad. My parents weren't financially wealthy, but then my parents still had the luxury of my mum choosing to stay at home. Such change in so little time, where now we place a priority on economics over family life. How difficult is it for a parent to choose to devote even the first year alone of their child's life caring for them at home? I didn't feel I had that option with my firstborn. I was, and mostly always have been, freelance. That is to say, if I wasn't working, I wasn't earning, and I was also the main breadwinner at home. So I went back to work after around 4.5, 5 months. It was part-time, but I was still going back to work. I felt pressure financially, but also professionally. There was an expectation, at least I felt that, to return to work as soon as possible, really. As a psychology graduate and as someone who'd been working and volunteering a lot with children's mental health charities, and as someone who'd gained very deep understanding through my own in-depth journey in psychotherapy, it didn't feel right. It didn't sit right with me. And when I speak today, I'm only ever speaking for myself. We can all only ever speak to our own experience. So because we'll all walk a different path for many different reasons. So it's really important to caveat that. I'm just sharing really today the lessons that I've learned, knowing all too well the pressures that parents do currently face. It's important for all of us to know, I think, that regardless of the journey we have, we can always have the relationship we want to have with our children. We absolutely can. That I am categoric. It takes time and investment on our part, and an acknowledgement that in their earliest years, our children do need us. We don't have to be perfect as parents. We certainly won't get it right all the time. I always say, just as there's no such thing as naughty, there's no such thing as perfect. We should always remember that, but nor do our children need us to be. And we can always repair. It's really important to talk about that. And it's something that I speak about in therapy a lot with my clients. It's another speech entirely, perhaps, to look at that in more depth. But going back to when I became a mum, I was really lucky to have the support of a wonderful psychotherapist, Lisa L. And she taught me so much about life, about parenting, and it led to the spark that ignited when I then did fall pregnant naturally for a second time at 43, after many, many years of trying. My husband and I had tried to conceive for many years, more than 5 IVFs, and those of you who've been through that will know that that's pretty hideous. And on our wedding day, we had accepted that we would never have one child, let alone be blessed with 2. So my pregnancies happened naturally, conceived naturally in my 40s. With Wilbur's pregnancy, at 43, I just couldn't do it all. I physically couldn't, and I actually didn't want to. And I determined to take more time off to be with both of my children. And my husband and I, we sat down and we just said we accept the financial consequences of that. I told him that we could live anywhere, we'd cut our cloth accordingly, but I just couldn't do it all, at least not at the same time. So my husband took on the baton. He started his own company. He had one client, and 10 years later is running his business that's far more successful than I've ever been. And it's interesting. I always talk about providence and how it follows us when we commit to things. And there's a wonderful poem by the Scottish mountaineer William Murray. If you don't know it, do look it up. It's Begin It Now. And he talks about providence and how when we commit ourselves, that providence follows us, that things happen to support us, to give us what we need when we need it the most. So I do think for all of us, it's really important to have faith. When we first become parents, it's very easy to lose our sense of self and, you know, am I ever going to work again? Or am I going to be the best mother that I can be? You know, there's a lot of stuff that can undermine our ability in ourselves. And commit to that important role of motherhood. And there's this providence that sometimes comes in to sort of give you what you need. And I want to talk about what it is that we need, because a lot of it that happens in community, but sometimes we have to commit to reaching out to say, I need a bit of help, and not feel that we failed by asking for help. We would never have felt that way when we parented as our ancestors did in small hunter-gatherer communities, that really it did lend itself the truth that it takes a village to raise a child. And I think it's really important to remember that, because contrary to what recent generations have been told, of women have been told, I don't think we can have it all, at least not all at the same time. And I think we need to really take the pressure off of ourselves to say it's not possible. Actually, we need community, because we can't do everything and still look after ourselves and still care and be the parent and the workplace person that we also want to be. That was my conclusion. Again, I'll only speak for me, but I certainly didn't feel that I could do that all well. So I took 2 years out of work, caring for my children, often solo parenting with a husband now working away for long periods. I returned to work part-time at the BBC, but I'd already resolved that given everything I'd learned in my studies, in my psychotherapy, and in my work as a volunteer at charities like Place to Be and the Anna Freud Centre, I'd learned how crucial the first few years of a child's life are, and how crucial for our children's future mental health. COVID then hit, lockdowns were introduced, and my husband's business was wiped out overnight. He could no longer travel, so that was it. And it was time for the baton to be passed again. Our children were a little bit older, he could be at home, but I wanted to be at home as well. So I stepped back from the broadcasting and turned to writing. I just felt compelled to writing about the neuroscience that showed me what it is to be a mother, the science that confirms what nature already knew. Who knew? That what a child experiences in their first few years of life will shape the adult they become and influence everything about their behavior, their future happiness, even future partners. I'll share a little bit of the science with you today. So this is the book that I wrote, There's No Such Thing as Naughty. And the first 2 chapters explain how our children's brains are built, how they develop from conception through the first few years of life, and how safe, loved, and understood our children feel during that time influences their future mental health and well-being. So just repeat that. How safe, loved, and understood our children feel in the first few years of life will influence their future mental health and well-being. It's that crucial. So the science has been around a while, and you'll likely be familiar with the work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, who referred to our children's psychological connection with us as attachment. The neuroscience is more recent, but nonetheless powerful. It's very complex. When I sat down to kind of write this book, I was like, God, you know, I need to be writing this for tired parents because I need to understand it a bit more simply myself, because you get these long names like cerebellum, amygdala, the brainstem, vagus nerve, prefrontal cortex. And I'm like, I need to come up with something a lot more simple that explains our children's brains and their behavior. So I came up with this concept called the lizard, the baboon, and the wise owl. So the baobab tree, known in Zimbabwe as the tree of wisdom, is our brain, or represents our brain. And then at the bottom of the tree sits our lizard. That's the brainstem, the cerebellum, the most ancient parts of our brain. The baboon sits on a branch high above. This is our limbic system. And then the wise owl sits at the top of the tree, and she's our prefrontal cortex and is what gives us perspective. So the lizard, the brainstem, is what really directed your children when they were in your womb, your babies in the womb. They regulate our breathing. The lizard regulates our breathing, heart rate, digestion, everything that's unconsciously driven. So it represents the brainstem, then this most ancient part of the brain. It's effectively hundreds of millions of years old. And it's the part of the brain that first develops in the womb. So it develops just 6 weeks after conception, which is incredible. When I didn't realize how quickly the brain starts to develop, but just 6 weeks post-conception. And this is the part of the brain that drives our unconscious behavior. So just like a little lizard, based on information received from the nervous system. So more information goes from this way up to that part of the brain than the other way around. So when our babies are too hot, they're too cold, they're hungry or thirsty, it's this part of the brain that instantly reacts, which is why our children cry. They have no other way of communicating, but it's driven by this little, very instinctive lizard. And that's where the fight, flight, freeze, faint response comes from. You can even actually, when your babies have that startle reflex, you can almost see the claw-like, because we are all intertwined, from evolutionary speaking. So anxiety and fear have their origins in this part of the brain. This part of the brain does not think. It doesn't conceive. It doesn't kind of go, I'm just going to start making the baby cry to piss mom and dad off, which is why babies can never be considered to manipulate or wrap us around their little finger. So anyone that suggests otherwise might be introduced to the book of the science, because it's just not true. And I always say, I don't deal in opinion, I deal in fact. When I'm looking at parenting, this is how I operate as someone sort of as a journalist. And, I want to give me facts. I'm curious about, so I can have my instinct the same as all of you, but it's wonderful when we have the facts to back up our instincts, and to sort of say to anybody that sort of says, oh, we're going to wrap you around your little thing. You go, actually, that's not the case, because right now my baby's being driven by their brainstem or the little lizard. They're not thinking. They are just driven by instinct, and they're basically, with their cries, are telling us, this is what I need. I'm just checking on myself on my time, which I now can't see. But I want to leave enough time for all of you, but I'm going to, yes, okay, we're good. So the baboon is next. So if something happens in the body, I'm hungry, it triggers something called the stress response, which basically means I need to eat now. It goes up to the little lizard, the messages go up, and then the lizard, as I think of him, metaphorically scampering up to the baboon, tugging on his tail. And this is the part of our brain that processes all the emotions and feelings that arise as a result of that information. So they get processed by the brain's fear center, our amygdala, and our memories are stored in the hippocampus in this part, what I think of as the baboon. So between them, the lizard and the baboon make all sorts of associations in life. They learn what it is, what things are to enjoy. If I'm a toddler and I go and touch a hot stove, that the impact, the sensory sort of input from that will literally register sort of through the nervous system into the brain, where it gets logged as, don't do that again. And then equally, when grandma comes up the path loaded up with goodies, the association is certainly made that the next time she comes, there's going to be a huge amount of joy felt in the body. In the same way, if a dog lunges at a baby in the park and no one's around to see, the baby might well grow up with what feels like an irrational fear of dogs, but not necessarily cognitively remember. They just sense the same feeling of fear that gets tagged by that baboon with avoid dogs. Okay, so it just gets stored. So this is how, when we start thinking about our babies and our toddlers and how their brains are developing, because most of their behavior in the first few years of life are driven from this very instinctive, very primitive parts of their brain. They don't process in the same way that adults do. And it's important for us to understand that. And in terms of understanding trauma with a small t, which, you know, a dog lunging at a baby and no one's around to sort of, if that gets missed, you know, and the baby. So my work is trauma-based. That's my field now, working as a child therapist. So it's really good for us to understand that when our children are experiencing in these early years of life, if they're unable to process it and sort of exorcise bad experiences like the dog lunging, it can sort of sit and held as traumatic experiences held in the body and brain, not for us to feel alarmed and now suddenly, you know, think and tell ourselves the story, oh my goodness, that means that, that, and that. It's just really important to understand why we say that what our children experience will influence them later on, because everything gets stored in the brain. Doesn't mean to say that we can't support our children to exorcise. That's why I wrote the book, because our love, care, attention, and understanding our children's behavior is actually what releases any held sense of stress that has got stuck. So you'll be doing it naturally as mothers. Your instinctive, beautiful reactions when you pick up baby cries, pick them up, we hold them, we regulate them in our presence, our soothing, jogging up and down gently, just that little bit. All of that, we now have the science that shows us why and how all of these things that we do so instinctively actually help to exorcise that sort of stuck stress. So it's really important while we are around to notice when the bottom lip quivers and to hear the cry that tells us something is really wrong and to soothe with our presence. Interestingly, if you look at the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, who's one of my gurus and has sort of quoted in the book and has read the book, and is that actually you might know this already, but when we hold our babies and we rock them at the same rate as their heartbeat, so we rock them, it's about 80, I think it said it's about 80 beats a minute, but we rock sort of slightly faster. And that's because we are then attuning to our babies' bodies and then bringing them back. So we regulate our children using our physical presence. Our nervous system to nervous system speaks to each other. So it's not words really with very young children, it's actually how our children feel in our presence. So parents instinctively and intuitively do this, and we do it when we have that sort of these lessons passed down to us, and that gets passed down to us by how we were raised. So what we are doing with our children is helping their brains to grow healthily, building resilience and all important empathy. The more we're around to help support that process, the more we help our children to develop their own wise owl. Now, the wise owl, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't really come on fully online until our children are around 3 years of age. So she's the part that has the big picture perspective. This is the part of our brain that I think of as this wise owl, so that when you've got a leaping lizard and a bounding baboon because they're a bit afraid, she swoops down and scoops them up in the warmth of her wings, and she's sort of the self-regulating presence. Now, our children don't have the equivalent of a wise owl until they're in their 20s. So if they're scared in the night, or they've had something unusual happen, or they're frightened at the school gate or at the nursery gate, you can bet your bottom dollar their lizard and baboon will be doing backflips. And that's when we will go in with our wise owl parenting, and literally bring them and regulate them back down. And what we're doing is helping the lizard and the baboon make more positive associations that it's okay, I've got you. And that's what builds up that really important sort of scaffolding for resilience in the future. And this is the part of the holy grail of mental health. When we achieve what we call vertical integration, which is where we have a wise owl, we need our baboon and lizard because they're fantastic. They tell us what we want to do in life and what we don't, but we also need our wise owl, and she allows us to experience all the highs and lows of life and not get overwhelmed, so that we can feel fear, we can feel joy, we can feel anger, but we'll also trust that we can express those emotions safely. So our children's brains don't finish their development until their mid-20s. Fastest growth is in the first few years of life. Get this period right, and we set our children up for life. Get it right, the economy thrives, with adults who are mentally robust, resilient, and empathic, all important empathy, because the child who feels that they have been cared for is the child who is able to feel and to be compassionate towards other people too. As my therapist Lisa used to say, when we have felt the cold, we are quick to offer a blanket. So when your children are able to offer a blanket to another child and to another adult, it's because you offered your children that blanket first. So I'll draw to a close. It's been a bit of a gallop because we thought we'd only have 20 minutes, but I just hope I've shared enough of the science, and if not, do read more, to assure you. I've just finished the second book as well, so I'm so passionate about it. But I really want to assure parents that the job, everybody actually, society, the job we do as parents, it really is the most important job in the world. It's not a cliche, fact, it's fact. We are raising the next generation, and if they are to take on the challenges that the world currently faces, they're going to need mighty strong foundations and all the support we can give. So I also hope to leave you with, I don't know, something that might reassure that the next time someone asks you, and what is it that you do, you can say, you are in the business of brain development, and you can start knowing it's entirely true.
Yeah, Kate and I talked for about an hour after this. It was so interesting with all of your questions, but I think we have only got time for about 10 minutes. But like I said, she is going to do an Instagram Live, and some of her questions that I asked her will be put on social media. So one of the questions is, mothers often have a combination of identities, mother, wife, partner, woman. How do you create a balance between the different roles, particularly the three, mother, wife, woman?
It's a great question. So let's not pretend it's easy, first of all. I would say we start from our sense of self, and from there we grow. Because when we have a really strong sense of self, it can help us to boundary our roles, and enable us to take time for us, to value ourselves, but also to recognize that all relationships take work, they take investment. And I think when we have a strong sense of self, we can give without feeling any resentment. And there's no judgment in that, by the way, because I think we all feel, if we don't feel understood, and if we're feeling a bit wobbly ourselves within, then we can feel that people are taking, whether it's our children, our partner, work, friends. And actually, when we learn to have a really strong sense of self, we can boundary and just say, actually, that's not acceptable to me. And we can just do it really softly and gently, say, actually, it's really not acceptable for me when I come home and the dishes are still not done and I'm the one that's being, and then we can explain, we have the strength to say, I feel quite hurt if I feel that I'm not heard, but I appreciate you might have a different perspective. So we start communicating differently because we can come from quite a strong place. Sense of self comes from, I'm a huge advocate of therapy, but it comes from our parenting. So that's why it's so important to instill a good sense of self in our children, because then they will grow and hopefully to learn the lessons that perhaps we've taken rather longer to learn. And I speak as someone in that regard.
How to build yourself and work out how the old you and the new mother role can work together. I think you've touched on it, but it feels impossible, she says.
Yeah, I think, look, it's that lie, can I put it like that, we were told, weren't we, I don't know what your generation then, but that whole thing of you can have it all. Well, we can't. Stop telling young women that. Like, it puts too much pressure. All parents, I always say we can have it all, but we can have it all, but just not at the same time. And I think sometimes it's giving the younger generation the permission to say, okay, I'm working here, I'm doing my role here, I am this person here, but now I'm a parent, I'll get back to you once I'm ready. And it might mean that the social life there has to be no's around that. It might mean that we say, I actually cannot, the same as I did with Mike, like, I just can't do this, I can't go back to work. And then we have to sort of figure out what we do from them. It's just not possible to be pulled every which way. And I know that we all do it. God knows, I know we all do it. But whether we're doing it in a way that we want to be doing it, that serves us, because very often it's us that get lost in all of that. I mean, I give everything and then I'm the one that doesn't get to do her, self-care. And that's something that I'm constantly having to work on. Sometimes it is just the way it is, but I think it's just remembering that we have these roles, but it's probably impossible to take everything on. So sometimes you have to step into that role, and then you just say, actually, I'm doing this now, and I've got to boundary it quite hard because I can't do it all at the same time.
Yeah. And how do you recover from mum guilt?
So community, being kind to ourselves, remembering that our ancestors never did it this way. If you're finding it hard today, it is harder, I think. Be honest when you think you're failing. So remember that we only need to get it right a third of the time. And there is a science in that, which I could explain, but we want to get through more questions. But, you know, you can be rubbish for a third, okay for a third, and then brilliant for a third. And that's it. That's what Donna Winnicott calls being good enough. So do not, you know, with that guilt is guilt and shame are two very pernicious emotions. And guilt is an emotion that shame tells us is a sense of who we feel that we are. So we never want to feel shame. We never want to shame children, because shame is a sense of I'm wrong. Guilt tells us that I've done something wrong, and whether that's a truism or whether it's not. But if we have a feeling of guilt, it says I've just done something wrong. I want to change something. I'm not doing this good enough. Then I would say sit with it. Don't be afraid of feeling guilt. It's a sort of a good indication. It's sort of, do I need to change the way that, you know, I'm doing things? There have been many times when I know that I've been working too many hours and I feel guilty that my children, when I was writing the last bit of the book, I was like, this is really this is irony, because I'm working in here and my children are over there on the other side and I'm not seeing them. That's not okay. So I had to repair that and say, guys, I'm really sorry. Mummy's at the last bit of her book. It's on a deadline and it's not, you know, and I had to repair that time that I'd spent doing something. So we can feel guilty. Don't sit in it though. Okay, because we can change guilt. We can say sorry. If we've done something wrong, we can say sorry. And if it's not something that that is our fault, we can think, well, hang on, who does need to apologize? What needs to change? So I would say be mindful of the difference with the emotions that we feel, but they're all messengers. So if we're feeling something, you want to sit with it. Don't run from it, because it might just be saying, actually, your children do need more of you. And then that's the role.